Economic systems like capitalism have always been built on top of a bedrock of actually existing communism. So says anthropologist David Graeber in his book, Debt: The First 5,000 Years. A stunning reversal of conventional wisdom. If you think this statement is contradictory, you probably have a common understanding of political theories. But once we remove some of our usual blinders, we will be able to see even more. That in fact, communism is the foundation of all human sociability. It is what makes society possible. For the context, the book itself is about the concept of debt and its history. It illustrates that before there was money, there was debt. This video is based on a very small fraction of it, barely a sub-chapter. Back to our surprising statement. Let me elaborate. Before we start our overthinking process, let's specify the terms. David Graeber defines communism here as any human relationship that operates on the principles of from each according to their abilities to each according to their needs. The author admits that the usage here is rather provocative. Communism is a word that can evoke strong emotional reactions, mainly, of course, because we tend to identify it with communist regimes. This is ironic, since the communist parties that ruled over the USSR and its satellites, and that still rule China and Cuba, mainly described their own systems as socialist instead of communist. Communism was always a distant, somewhat fuzzy utopian ideal, usually to be accompanied by the withering away of the state, to be achieved at some point in the distant future. As a result, our thinking about communism has been dominated by a myth. The term communism here is not some magical utopia, and neither does it have anything to do with ownership of the means of production. It is something that exists right now, that exists to some degree in any human society, although there has never been one in which everything has been organized in that way, and it would be difficult to imagine how there could be. All of us act like communists a good deal of the time. None of us acts like a communist consistently. If someone fixing a broken water pipe says, "Hand me the wrench," his coworker will not, generally speaking, say, "And what do I get for it?" Even if they are working for ExxonMobil, Burger King, or Goldman Sachs. Even though the conventional wisdom states that communism just doesn't work, the way we define communism here is the key to efficiency. If you really care about getting something done, the most efficient way to go about it is to allocate tasks by ability and give people whatever they need to do them. This is why, in the immediate wake of great disasters, a flood, a blackout, or an economic collapse, people tend to behave the same way, reverting to a rough and ready communism. Hierarchies and markets become luxuries that no one can afford. Psychologists call this catastrophe compassion. According to the disaster sociology, the typical response to disaster is not mass panic, but in words of scientist Charles Fritz, rather, an intimate, primarily group solidarity among the survivors, which overcomes social isolation, provides a channel for intimate communication and expression, and provides a major source of physical and emotional support and reassurance. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake, the Halifax explosion in 1917, the 1985 Mexico City earthquake, the September 11 attacks, and the effects of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans in 2005, all include various instances of social action and altruism in response to these disasters, providing evidence that mutual aid and cooperation are a typical human response to disasters and the breakdown of official authority. Without any disaster, in regular circumstances, baseline communism. The understanding that, unless people consider themselves enemies, if the need is considered great enough or the cost considered reasonable enough, the principle of from each according to their abilities to each according to their needs will be assumed to apply. Any of us will expect a total stranger to take their time and help us with the directions in an unknown city. Sharing is not simply about morality, but also about pleasure. Solitary pleasures will always exist, but for most human beings, the most pleasurable activities almost always involve sharing something. Music, food, liquor, drugs, gossip, drama, beds. There is a certain communism of the senses at the root of most things we consider fun. But there is still an issue with inequality. We simply cannot care for everyone in the same way. As a result, we don't help everyone with the same enthusiasm. One always behaves in a spirit of solidarity more with some people than others. First among these are those we love, with mothers being the paradigm of selfless love. Others include close relatives, wives and husbands, lovers, and one's closest friends. These are the people with whom we share everything, or at least to whom we know we can turn in need, which is the definition of a true friend everywhere. As a result, any community could be seen as crisscrossed with relations of individualistic communism, one-to-one relations that operate to varying intensities and degrees on the basis of from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. The paradox. Communism has its limits. If you have a rich friend, you come to them in times of need, and they're expected to help you. But only to a certain degree. No one expects the friend to provide so much help that it threatens to undermine the underlying inequality. Likewise, communistic relations can easily start slipping into relations of hierarchical inequality, often without anyone noticing it. It's not hard to see why this happens. Sometimes different people's abilities and needs are grossly disproportionate. Gift in this context doesn't mean something given freely, not mutual aid that we can ordinarily expect human beings to provide to one another. To thank someone suggests that they might not have acted that way, and that therefore the choice to act this way creates an obligation, a sense of debt, and hence inferiority. It's not that the tendency for communism to slip into hierarchy is inevitable, but rather that one must always guard against it.